Hey guys, today I want to do a video on the various malfunctions that you might encounter going to the range, whether you're a new shooter for the first time or somebody who's been going to the range a lot but hasn't really experienced a lot of malfunctions. If that's you, that's great. I'm glad that you haven't had any issues, but these are how you will identify and fix the issue from happening in the future. So I have two snap caps here. I have the tip of a bullet. All of these are inert. They won't produce live rounds today. And then I have a firearm where we are going to visually and physically inspect the chamber. We're going to leave the slide open because we're going to start showing some of the issues. Now, the first four that we're going to talk about are very common, easy to fix malfunctions. They're not really that unsafe as long as you deal with them in somewhat of a safe manner. But at the end, we're going to have two malfunctions that are actually kind of unsafe. Naturally, they produce some of the more horrific incidents at gun ranges because people aren't prepared for them and they don't really know how to handle them. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the importance of safety when we get there. So first, we're going to talk about the most common, which is stovepiping. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this snap cap and we're going to pretend that this bullet at the end of the snap cap doesn't exist, and this is just a shell. Okay. If you're not familiar with how bullets, specifically 9mm, work, it's your bullet wedged into a casing. Casing has some powder in here, and then it has a rim right here that the extractor latches onto, and then you have a primer. And all of these, the primer is what the firing pin strikes, which ignites the powder, which creates an explosion, and then the bullet leaves the barrel. All of these things are important to understand if we are going to talk about malfunctions. So here's our bullet snap cap. We're pretending the bullet is gone. This is just a casing. This is a stovepipe. So a stovepipe looks a little bit, and I'm going to try to do this in a safe manner, looks a little bit like this, okay? It is wedged in between the front of the back portion of the slide and the barrel. It's just the casing. And so you've shot around, and the extractor has tried to extract the round case from the barrel out the ejection port here, and it hasn't made it all the way out before the slide slams forward, and it gets caught in between the barrel and the slide. And so what this does is it prevents the next round in the magazine from getting captured by the slide and input into the chamber, because the slide is not all the way forward yet. So when you go to pull the trigger, nothing will happen. There's no round in the chamber for the firing pin to hit. Okay, how do we identify this? So identifying it is pulling the trigger, nothing happens. There's a few things that can cause that, but the first thing that we're looking for is this stovepipe. So when I pull the trigger, I do this maneuver. I keep the firearm pointed down range, which is what we are going to do for literally every malfunction. Never turn and ask somebody how to do it. Keep it pointed down range. Make it vocal if you need help, but we're always going to keep it down range. All right, so I do this maneuver. I tilt the firearm like this. So from the top, that's what it'll look like. But when you're aiming, it'll look like this. Now, what this allows me to do is I get to see the entire side profile, and I'm still pointed down range, but it's tilted a little bit. And I get to see that the slide is further back because now I can see the recoil spring. I can see that the beaver tail is forward of the back of the slide. And if the casing is aimed in such a way that you can see it, you'll also be able to see the casing. And so as soon as I see that casing and I see that the slide is back, hasn't slammed forward yet, I know that I can fix this by just tilting the firearm like this, still pointed down range, back the slide, and that'll chamber the next round, okay? So if this round had been in there, it would have chambered. We have a live round in there now, and we should have an empty casing sitting right there, okay? So now you can go back to firing and fire. So what causes a stovepipe? There's two things that I can think of that might cause a stovepipe. And the very first is probably the most common, especially if you're a new shooter, and it's called limp wristing. So limp wristing is caused by improper grip on the firearm. So I have a video on grip if you want to go watch it. That'll teach you how to grip a firearm so that this does not happen as often to you. So let's say you fixed your grip. Let's say you had a stovepipe, you realized you were limp wristing, and you fixed your grip and you're holding the gun tight now. Let's say you fire your next round, or you're in the next series of rounds, you fire and a stovepipe happens again. Well, now we're not looking at user error. We're looking at potentially an issue with the firearm itself, specifically the extractor. The extractor might be warped or just designed poorly. So now when it attempts to extract a round and the slide kicks back, it's not making it all the way out the ejection port before the slide slams forward. So that you'd have to see a gunsmith or reorder an extractor part and try to fix it yourself. It's pretty hard to do. It's not something that the average person who's just bought their first firearm is just going to be able to sit down and do without lots of instruction. So that is how you would fix that. You'd look at your extractor, you'd see if there's some damage to it or some wear, or maybe it's dirty or grimy and it's preventing that round from extracting fully. Okay, so that is stovepiping, first malfunction. What is the second malfunction that we're going to talk about? It is called failure to feed, okay? So failure to feed is this. You've got a few rounds in your magazine. You've got your magazine inserted and you drop the slide, and I'm going to pop this down a little bit. And you drop the slide and you go to pull the trigger aimed down range and nothing happens, and you realize it's because none of the rounds left the magazine. That can happen on a fresh magazine where you've dropped the slide, but it can also happen in the middle of a magazine firing. So let's say you've got 17 rounds in here, you fire 5 and the 6th round doesn't chamber. What's causing that? Okay, what's causing that is likely a magazine issue. And there's multiple magazine issues that can cause this. It's most often going to happen because you're using a third-party magazine. So this is a SIG magazine for a SIG P365. It's very unlikely to happen on this type of magazine because this is what we call OEM factory. If you have something like a Pro Mag, which is a company that makes recreation magazines for your firearm, the spring might be a little too tight, which means that you're getting too much tension on the first round that you're about to use. And so these fins here that capture the round are going to have too much pressure from the down position, and it's going to capture that. So when the slide tries to slam forward and strip the round off the magazine, this will happen. It'll slide slowly forward, but it'll still get caught in the magazine. So you could have warped fins that are hooking on that rim right there. So these fins can just capture it. The tension itself can capture it. Or maybe you have a replacement recoil spring. So maybe you're shooting your buddy's gun and he's swapped out his 16-pound recoil spring factory for a 9-pound recoil spring. And now the spring doesn't have enough tension to take the round out of the magazine into the chamber. So those are failure to feeds. There's not a lot of issue that the user can do to cause that issue. These are all usually mechanical issues with the magazine itself or the recoil spring in the firearm. Okay. So we've talked about failure to feed. Now we're going to talk about what's called the double feed. The double feed is a very similar issue, but here's what's going on with the double feed. So you've got a round chambered in the magazine, okay? You fire, and the bullet comes out. So we're going to represent it with a little bullet here. Flies out of the end of the barrel. And the extractor fails to hook on to the casing. Okay, so the slide kicks back, but it doesn't eject the casing from the slide. That in itself is a malfunction called failure to eject. But the problem with the failure to eject is that it produces usually a double feed, especially if there's still rounds loaded in your magazine. So what just happened? The slide kicked all the way back, and because there's a round still in the magazine, the slide lock doesn't lock the slide back. What happens is the slide tries to go forward now. And you can see I've just produced the error. So the casing that's still stuck in the chamber now is preventing that new round from going in. And this can happen in several ways. It can get stuck under the round that's still in the chamber. It can it can slide up the back of that spent casing and get stuck at the top end of that barrel, so the new round will be stuck at an angle upwards. How do we fix this? Well, the easiest way to fix it is to lock the slide back by racking the slide and then pushing up on the slide stop. And then you drop the slide, which should still have a partially chambered round. Let's say that the slide did actually remove that round a little bit. It'll look more like this. You've now racked the slide back, which should loosen up the new round. You'll drop the slide, and that other round will just drop free. So now you still have a casing in here. How do you fix that? Well, you get a tool, and you can either do one of two things. You can either attempt now to try to get the extractor to extract it, so that'll look like this. There, see, all I did was get it functioning until the extractor managed to get it cased. Or, if the extractor seems to not be working, and it's chambered, you get your little tool out, and you look for that rim on the case, and you just pull it out, all right? And now you have something to worry about. And what we have to worry about is we did fire that round. All that happened was that the extractor failed to get the casing out. So if you watched the round leave the barrel, meaning you were watching your target and you watched the target get hit, odds are you don't have anything to worry about. But if you're not sure if you watched the target get hit, you have to look out for the thing that we're going to talk about at the end of the video called a squib. We are going to talk about that right now. A squib is when a round gets stuck in the barrel. How do we check to make sure that our double feed or failure to extract didn't produce a squib? Well, you can take a flashlight with the slide open. You're going to point this down at a surface, knowing that the gun is empty other than potentially your squib, so nothing in the chamber. You're going to take your flashlight, you're going to stick it in the ejection port, and you're looking for light being produced out the end of the barrel on the surface that you're pointing it at, okay? You're never going to look down the barrel. You're never going to do anything like that. We're treating this as if it's live, even if we don't think it is, okay? So you're going to put the flashlight in the ejection port, look for a light. If there's a light, you know that there's probably nothing stuck in the barrel. If you're very concerned, you can take it all apart at this point, take your barrel out, and you can look down the back end of the barrel and make sure that there's nothing stuck in there. We will talk about squibs at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. That is not all the information we have on squibs. Okay, so that is your double feed. The very last common issue that we can encounter, which will lead into what I call a hang fire, is a light primer strike or failure to fire. Okay, so what is that? We have a round. It is in the chamber. We've dropped the slide. It's ready to fire. We fire, nothing happens. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about a chambered round. We know there's someone in there. We know we pulled the trigger. We heard the click. Nothing's happened. Well, what we do is we drop the magazine and we eject the casing. And then we take the casing that ejected, and hopefully it didn't fly into the dirt or the gravel or your shooting bay next to a bunch of cartridges, because you want to inspect this round now. So you'll take your round and you'll look at the primer. Now on mine, this is a snap cap, so I just have a piece of plastic here, but it does have a dimple, right? And that's what it'll look like. It'll be this metal sheen primer, and there will be a dimple on it, and that is called a light primer strike. If you see that, you want to take this round and you want to put it aside and treat it as if you fired that round, and you want to leave it away from you, all right? It's not going to explode. It might go off. That's what we would call potentially a hang fire. The hang fire is more concerning when it's in the barrel, but if it goes off on its own, it's away from you, it's not going to be a big problem. It's pointed either like down range or whatever. It's not going to cause a big issue. So you just want to move it aside and give it to somebody who can deal with it, because you can't just throw it in the trash. You've got to deal with it as if it's still technically a live round. Okay, so that is a light primer strike, and what's happening there is you've actually got either like a dirty firing pin, a damaged firing pin, or your striker needs to be cleaned. There is a hole in the back of here that it's the firing pin hole where the striker produces the firing pin through the hole to strike the primer, and something is preventing it from striking the primer all the way. So it dents it, but it doesn't actually pierce it. All right, so that's kind of how you fix it. You're just going to remove the round. You're going to set the round aside. You're not going to put it back in the magazine or the gun. I know some people do. You'll see it all the time. There'll probably be some comments here about, oh, just reload it and try to shoot it again. I wouldn't do that. I don't advise doing that. For safety reasons, just set it aside. It's a 20-cent round. It's not worth damaging your expensive firearm. Okay. I mentioned hang fire. Here's the problem with this light primer strike. If you don't know what to do with a light primer strike, and maybe you've pierced that primer more than you think you have, you've chambered around, well, there we go. That snap cap doesn't like to fit. You've chambered around, you've pulled the trigger, and you have what's called essentially a light primer strike. Now there's a live round sitting in your chamber where the primer has been exposed to the firing pin. Maybe it's pierced more than you think, and it's actually just called a hang fire, meaning there might be something in the gunpowder that's doing a slow burn or a slow ignite that hasn't fully ignited. And then when it finally hits the powder, the round's going to go off. And because it's still in the barrel, it'll produce the exact same effect as firing the round anyways, but slower in terms of when the trigger was pulled to when the bullet leaves the barrel. The concerning part about this is that if you've got your firearm aimed down range and you pull the trigger and nothing happens, new shooters will often get confused. And like I said, always point it down range, and they will turn and be like, how do I fix this? Asking a friend. And then the hang fire will go off and it is aimed in a way that's not safe. So that's very dangerous. If you have a malfunction with your firearm, again, and you do not know what to do, the safest thing to do at this point in time would be to keep it pointed down range, put it down on the bench, step away, and ask somebody nearby, hey, I'm having an issue with my firearm. Before they touch it, clearly explain what happened so that they can go through the steps, and make sure that they are somebody who actually knows what's going on and not just somebody who thinks, well, I think I can fix this. So make sure they know about firearms before they touch it, but have it pointed down range, because if the hang fire goes off, now you're still pointed in a safe direction. Okay, squib. Squib is a little bit more complicated. I have to take this apart to show you a barrel so that we can talk about the squib. Squib can cause a much bigger issue, and it's not something like the hang fire, which you can just set down and walk away from. You actually have to do some stuff. So I need to take the barrel out of this. I'm going to do it off camera because I don't know how YouTube feels about that. Okay, I have taken the slide off, and we're going to take the barrel out. Here's our barrel. This is the recoil spring, and this is the slide, okay? So we're going to leave these kind of in the orientation that they would be in the firearm, and we're going to talk about a squib. A squib needs this bullet tip to explain. This is the bullet. This is what flies out the end of the barrel. I know in the movies and the cartoons, what you'll see is a cartoonish looking cartridge fly out of your barrel as if they fire the whole cartridge. But what happens is the shell obviously gets removed from the bullet, and the shell gets extracted, and the bullet goes out the barrel. All right, in a squib situation, you have fired a round, okay? So you have your chambered round like that. The firing pin strikes it, and everything happens just as it normally would. You'll hear a loud bang. You'll see the extractor extract your shell. The shell will fall out of the ejection port, and everything looks normal, except now you have a bullet stuck in your barrel. And that's very close to where it was chambered. That's not what it will actually look like. It will end up being somewhere down here because an explosion has happened that has forced it into the barrel, and it'll get stuck somewhere here instead of right there. So you can see that right now, as it is, if I try to chamber around, I can't actually get around in there because the bullet's too close to the end. But in a real squib, your bullet will be somewhere down here, and you can chamber another round. What's the problem with this? This is one of the most dangerous things that can happen. It's the hardest to identify because almost all of the identifiers that you would expect to see when firing a round have happened, including loud bang, recoil, ejected shell. The trigger pulled, I heard the click, I heard the bang, I saw the shell. This round is now chambered. The slide has slammed forward, so now everything's primed to fire the next round. If this round gets struck by the firing pin, the same thing should happen, which is that this will now attempt to fire a live round. However, there's something blocking the bullet from leaving the chamber. Now, in an ideal world, this would just hit the end of the bullet and they'd both pop out the end of the gun and maybe not go that far. But that's not really what's going to happen because of physics. So the explosion creates a bunch of gas. The bullet tries to leave. It slams into this. It'll probably warp and expand, and the gas builds up. It has nowhere to escape. So some of the points of escapage for the gas are going to be the ejection port right here and out the bottom of the magazine. But the gas expands so rapidly and cannot leave the barrel because this copper jacketed lead object here has expanded to meet the exact dimensions of the barrel under extreme pressure and heat. So now the gas tries to expand. And because this is steel, what happens is it explodes. It breaks apart, it fractures, it sends pieces everywhere. Your magazine is going to eject out the bottom very rapidly. Your trigger's probably going to break. These pieces are probably going to fly off in this direction. Everything's going to be cracked. The barrel's going to expand and be broken and unusable. It's going to be very violent. Plastic's probably going to splinter and cut your hand. It's going to be the most uncomfortable experience of your life, if not potentially life-ending. So this is what you need to worry about. And the way you identify it, there's only one way that I know of, is when you fire the round, you are looking to see if you hit your target, okay? And if the target has a hole in it, you know that a squib didn't happen. There's no other real way to identify this other than you might feel something slightly off, okay? When you pull the trigger, the recoil will be slightly different, the feel in your hand will be slightly different, and this bullet right here is the bullet that I caught when it happened to me. So a couple weeks ago, I was firing this P365, which is why I have this out on the table, and it did get stuck into this chamber. And I shot the round, and I was shooting pretty rapidly. I'm not the fastest shooter in the world, but pretty rapidly. And all of a sudden, I pulled the trigger, and I just felt something off. So I had the next round ready to go, and I took my hand off the trigger, and I thought, I need to check this. And I racked the slide back, and I saw that the new round was chambered. And I thought, you know, I don't trust this. So I dropped the magazine. I took everything apart, and I looked. And I saw that bright copper all the way down there. And the way you fix it is you take a device that you can stick down the barrel once you get the barrel out of the gun, and you just kind of stick it in the end of the barrel, and you just slam it and poke the round out, okay? And you don't want to do it in this direction because whatever got it stuck in the barrel in the first place is just going to get more stuck. You want to do it from the front of the barrel with the barrel out of the gun, mind you. Don't do this while it's still in the gun. But you want to do it out of the barrel. And then once you have it out of the barrel, if you feel like you still want to shoot this firearm, you can. What normally will cause this is just a bad powder in the round or a warped portion of the bullet. This one, I think, was a warped bullet because you can see it tried to shred some of that copper off the copper jacketing there. And I think it got stuck in the barrel when I fired it. Another thing that you will often see with a squib, and hopefully you see this if it happens, is some of that black powder, if it was bad black powder, will kind of blow up out of your ejection port and it'll get all over your hand because you're holding it and the black powder kind of just spews out. So after you fired and the squib happens, if the powder caused the issue and not a warp in the bullet head, you might see a bunch of black powder everywhere. And so put your firearm down, check to see if there's a squib. Extremely dangerous. You don't want a firearm to explode. You can lose your life. You can end up damaging or destroying entirely your firearm. So check for that. So yeah, hopefully you guys don't ever experience these things. Hopefully you just go to the range and have fun. But now we've kind of basically covered all of the things that might cause this, how to fix all of them. So if you have any questions that I haven't covered, drop a comment. I will respond. And thanks for watching, guys.